Yes, Brexit. The UK has now voted to leave the European Union, and as a Dutchman living and working in Northern Ireland for the past 7 years, that has quite a profound impact on me. First of all, taking it outside the business context and looking at it on a personal level, I have never felt unwelcome in Northern Ireland. In fact, the Northern Irish local community has welcomed me with open arms, and I felt very welcome and very embraced by the people here, and felt like I was really contributing to society here, and doing my bit to help the local digital economy grow and mature. Last Friday, after the Brexit vote, was the very first day since I lived there that I felt unwelcome as a European citizen in the United Kingdom, and that was a very strange feeling. And not a very nice feeling. And I'm still coming to grips with that to an extent. Fortunately, a lot of people around me have said that, they don't want me to go anywhere. They still feel that I'm very much part of the local community here and want me to stick around. But it's been tough for me to come to grips with such a massive vote to leave the European Union, because I've always considered myself to be a European citizen first and foremost, rather than a Dutchman. But that's a personal thing. On a professional level, as a provider of SEO services to clients all across Europe, this will have a very strong impact to how I do business. I have quite a few clients who are based in the Republic of Ireland, which is just a few short miles from Belfast, where I live and work. And my business dealings with them are going to have to change depending on what happens with the exit negotiations. I can imagine it's going to become harder for me as well to win new clients in the Republic of Ireland because of the uncertainty around Brexit at the moment. It's very likely I'm going to have to set up a business in Dublin if I want to keep on winning new clients there, which I do want to do because it is a very fertile market. And Northern Ireland is a fairly small place after all, and only so much that I can achieve here. Northern Ireland itself is going to have a massive impact on the Brexit vote, because it is so dependent on the Republic of Ireland as well as on the European Union funding. So that is going to severely impact business here across all industries, especially farming and manufacturing. And since I have quite a lot of clients in the manufacturing industry, as well as in tourism, which is also going to be affected quite heavily, I suspect we'll see smaller budgets and less long-term investment in SEO and digital marketing, at least on the short term, until the uncertainties are ironed out and we see what is happening with the economy. The change in exchange rate between the pound and the euro has already affected me, of course, because some of my clients pay me in euros, which is a good thing because I get more euros now for the same pound. But on the other hand, I do invoice other clients in pounds. So it makes me cheaper for them to get the service out there, which should help me win more business, ironically, in the long term. But in the short term, like I said, the uncertainty around Brexit is going to negatively impact business in Northern Ireland and myself as an SEO provider. As for the future, like I said, it's been tough for me as a European citizen, and just to see the emotional decisions that people have made around Brexit. And I'm responding emotionally to that as well, rather than rationally. And I sort of resent myself from doing that, but it's hard to escape that, It's hard to escape the notion that the country has voted on such a large scale to close itself off from Europe. And as a European citizen, that hurts me, it really does. And I'm not sure how I can come to grips with that. In due time, I will. My wife and I are talking a lot about what's happening and what we're going to do in the future, because he's a British citizen, of course, and I'm a Dutch citizen. And we're going to have to see about what happens with regards to, freedom of movement, freedom to work in European countries. We have putting contingency plans in place. Basically, I'm applying for permanent British residency. At the same time, my wife, being a Northern Irish resident, is entitled to an Irish passport, which is an option we're pursuing as well, so that we'll both have two passports, so we can basically choose to live and work in the UK or live and work anywhere else in the European Union. So we're keeping our options open at the moment. It's a bit of an uncertain situation right now. And we'll just have to wait and see what happens in the short term, the medium term, and the long term. For SEO, nothing really will change. Google hasn't changed. The algorithms still work. It's more for businesses to work through this period of uncertainty and wait out the economic repercussions of a UK exit of the European Union. And, well, as always, SEO will adapt. It's what we're good at. We always go with the flow. We adapt to changes and see whatever happens. A lot of information is out there at the moment that is not necessarily accurate. People are just speculating on what's going to happen. A lot of harsh words being spoken to people on all different camps and different sides of the equation. I've tried to not engage too much in that, even though I feel personally very angry and frustrated at what's happened. But it's not a particularly productive use of my energy to, rant and rave too much about that. Usually I'm very keen on ranting and raving about topics, as a lot of people know out there, but this has affected me on such a personal level that I find myself emotionally unable to do that. So I'm just keeping my distance at the moment and seeing how it will all pan out. On the whole, though, we just don't know what's going to happen, so it's hard to jump to conclusions at the moment. We'll just wait and see, and hopefully, it's going to be business as usual soon, which I hope we can get back to just delivering good value for our clients, as we always have.
Wow, Brexit, it's who would have thought it would happen? We've had the run-up. It's been probably one of the longest few months because of that very reason. And almost irrespective of the sides, the direction that you took, I think the sense of the gravity around it is impressive, if nothing else, because people seem to finally be taking an interest and a stake in the decisions that really matter to them. Down to my personal views and values, I'm disappointed. I kind of hold a view that I call the Bill and Ted philosophy, and that's that everyone just needs to be excellent to each other, which that kind of discourse has been seen as naive at the moment. It's often been looked upon as missing the whole point. But for me, it's quite a simple value set. In terms of the direction it's taken, personally, we've done a lot of research. We've produced a lot of content around Brexit and the question of parting ways with the EU in many different industries. And I think the key thing coming into this is no one really knows what's going to happen. And that is the greatest, I guess, concern, really, because if nothing else, a lack of certainty leaves room for other things like doubt and obviously worry. Although some may argue that that's actually the excitement or kind of interest and kind of part of it. What the future holds, it'll be difficult to ask. I've even been asked what is the influence this going to have on specific industries and specific people, and I wish we knew. It's a simple one. I'm just as shocked as everyone else. I think if nothing else, one thing it does show is that people just are disconnected with the kind of establishment in the quote unquote, and feel disaffected by it. And actually, PMQs yesterday in the UK, there was like nearly 14,000 people on the Guardian live stream for it, and that's 14,000 people watching it live. And it doesn't matter that it was on Facebook, but I think a lot of people sat there and watched, fairly elderly white men arguing about stuff that they know very little about. So, who knows where that's going to take it? I think I've always tried to stay relatively balanced. And do I think that we're on a crash course for disaster? I'm not qualified to say. I mean, I personally would rather we stay in. It's because I happen to quite like Europe. And, I like the project and I like the ideology. I'm just sad it seems like we couldn't make it work. So who knows? We'll have to see.
Well, without a doubt, the Brexit outcome has been a shock to many, myself included. And there's always been the question of why something happens, and nothing really happens without a reason. When we get to something as momentous as this so quickly, and it is so final, and it affects so many people globally in many ways, there are many reasons behind it, and there are many moving parts. So just looking at one sort of cause, or perhaps thinking it's ideology, or it's inequality, is only one point of view. And essentially, from my perspective, it's a question of communication. It's a question of disconnect that is happening across the world of businesses as well as the world of politics. And this reflects that. And I'm going to expand on this a little bit. Now, essentially, we are in a post-industrialist, post-capitalist, and perhaps even post-political world. But that doesn't mean that somehow a switch has been pressed and we have entered a brand new era with a fully worked out playbook, which we fully understand and everything connects. Quite the opposite, in fact. We're muddling our way through a brand new century, facing problems which are unprecedented, without any rules, without any playbook, making things up as we go along. And this is really the problem, because everything which we face in terms of issues is hugely complex. It creates fear and uncertainty in us, whether the us is a political body, or a marketing body, or an audience which has been marketed to, or a company which actually does something in the world of business. And the responses to that, every problem which we face is really complex and complicated and requires a very detailed, very thorough, and perhaps thoughtful response. And the solutions are not easy to find. But the responses to that uncertainty are very knee-jerk from all of us. We tend to be afraid, and the moment we're afraid, fear becomes a bad counselor, and we tend to do things which are usually not as easy to predict, and certainly their outcome is always very difficult. Is there a solution to this? And certainly it is. I mean, we are riding in the 21st century, riding legacy organizations and legacy systems into a world that is not really designed for them. We don't fully trust them, and they don't fully understand us. And that has to change. And the only way these things can change is through open communication that is transparent. It creates points where trust can be developed from both sides, whatever those sides may be. And then a mutually agreed upon sort of plan can move forward. And whether we're talking about businesses or politics, in this case, the issue is the same and the solutions are the same. And here's the thing, the solutions are not easy. The problems are incredibly big, incredibly complex, and the apparent choices which we make always appear easy because of the knee-jerk things which tend to take us back to the past. Well, the past is not a past we're going to. Things have changed. So even if we try to reverse things, it will never work. And what we see in terms of Brexit here is a symptom of that changing world. So from my perspective, however deplorable the outcome, and I'm really sad about what's happening, it is exactly what should happen. It gives us challenges which should wake us up, and we must face the new world that's emerging. Thank you.
Okay. Hi guys, David Bain here from authoritas.com. So Anton asked me on here to give my opinion on Brexit and what's happening with that. And I thought to begin with, I don't know what's going on, but then I thought, actually, nobody knows what's going on, which is a little bit scary, possibly as well. I guess the most important thing is just to try and carry on as normal until we actually do know what's going on. But what it is, I had a little think about it, and I wrote down 3 points that I reckon were fairly relevant to what I was thinking about. And that was, first of all, what are the types of businesses that are likely to be impacted by this? And secondly, what impact might it have for authoritas.com, obviously the company that I'm head of growth for? And number 3, how might it impact me and other people in my position personally? So these are obviously just my thoughts personally, nothing set in stone at all. I'm sure you've all got your own thoughts. It would be good to hear your opinion on this as well. So first of all, with regards to businesses that should be concerned the most, well, I reckon that businesses that probably have a bigger concern are the ones that have all their eggs in one basket, maybe are just trading with the EU and that's their core business, or perhaps even their core businesses in the UK. And they may be impacted by currency fluctuations, because over the last few days, obviously, we've seen the pound reduce in value quite a bit. That means that imports are going to cost more, which means that inflation could be higher in the UK as well. So that could mean that certain things become less affordable for people in the UK. So if you've got all your eggs in one basket, I reckon that could be a bit more challenging, certainly, as well. Number two, the impact that it might have on authoritas.com. So here, we're an SEO platform for agencies and enterprises. We've got clients all over the world. So that's probably a fairly good thing. We've got clients in the US, clients in Australia, clients in Europe and other places. So what that means is we've got revenue that comes in different currency, different denominations, and hopefully in the different regions of the world, not every region is necessarily going to be affected by recession or so many challenges with their economy. So if that's the case, maybe we can have a push in a certain region in the world which is less likely to be impacted. Maybe in the US, maybe if we can earn more revenue in US dollars, then that could be fairly good, actually, because obviously the pound is reducing in value. And then once we actually earn in that, then that could potentially outweigh any negative impacts within the UK itself. Another good thing, actually, is we haven't taken much investment as a business. We've grown quite organically. So growing maybe a little bit more slowly than some other big software platforms out there. But you get businesses that have got 40, 50, much more $1 million in debt and are reliant on future investment as well. So maybe future investment, certainly over the next couple of months, could be a bit challenging in that kind of environment. So I guess businesses that have less debt or are less reliant on investments, and that could be pretty good. Number three, so how might it impact people in my position? So I'm a Scot living in London, and my wife is French, actually. So quite a combination going on there. So how is that going to impact me? Well, over the short term, I'm trying not to even think about it because so many things are going to happen. There was big debates in the EU today. Obviously, the result of the referendum in Scotland was that 62% of people voted to remain, compared with in the UK that was 48%. So that's quite a difference there. So at the moment, Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland, she's actually trying to debate with people to see what kind of resolution there might be for Scotland. I'm not sure if that will result in another independence referendum. If it does, then it will probably be a little while because there are a lot of decisions to make first. At the moment, UK haven't even submitted Article 50 to the European Union to formally give notice. And I guess that would have to happen before there was any decision in terms of what happened in terms of Scotland. So it will be very interesting. There's a small chance, if that did happen, if Scotland did become independent, that it would have to actually join the euro currency if it were to actually try and join the European Union. So that would be very, very interesting economically, certainly with the England as being the core trading partner of Scotland, but it wanting to be in Europe. So a lot of unresolved situations there. So I'm kind of waiting a bit nervously with regards to what happens, but trying not to be too concerned because there's absolutely nothing I can do about it. So I reckon the overall picture is for everyone just to try and just be fairly calm and understand that it's not the end of the world. Physically, we're still just as close to Europe, and I'm sure we'll still have the same European friends in 3 months' time and 3 years' time as we do at the moment. I think the world in general is more interlinked now than it ever has been, and that's never going to go away. We work in the digital economy, so we're probably more linked than any other sector out there. So my takeaway is not to worry about it, and that hopefully everyone else is feeling the same way. So there we go. That's my thoughts. What are your thoughts?
Okay, well, I think from the point of view of what's happening in Europe at the moment, with the EU looking to lose the UK, from my point of view, I was definitely voting for Remain. I think from a UK standpoint, we're very much stronger within the EU. I think if we were to look at leaving, this would be very much a rush decision. I don't believe that from the way the referendum was held, that there was enough information for the general public to give an informed choice. We're already seeing from the Leave camp a lot of turn back on a lot of the stuff that they said, and a lot of confusion within the government. The PM, of course, stepping down, and the market having some turmoil. From a personal point of view, it's a little scary. There is a huge amount of uncertainty here. It's also brought out some of the worst of Britain. The reports that we're seeing on the news, there's a lot of video being shot that's being put onto Facebook, a lot of out and out behind this, with thoughts that the day after the election, anyone that hasn't been born here, speaks a funny voice or looks a bit different should leave the country. And it really is a scary time at the moment. As for what happens next, I don't think anyone has a clear view on that. I think it's very much up to the discussions over the next few weeks. We've seen some rather interesting video take part in the EU today, with Farage making his opinion well known. I think it's going to be a matter of time will tell whether we actually do go ahead, we push the button on Article 50, or whether we find that there is another solution. And as I say, my view is I hope we find a way to remain part of the EU.
Hey, Anton, how you doing? Well, thank you, first of all, for inviting me on to talk about, obviously, the impact that Brexit has, and my personal opinion of it. So first of all, I guess I'll preface by saying I'm British Indian, and my parents came over to the UK as economic migrants in the 60s. It would have been initially, my grandparents coming over, then my parents, and we've kind of all established and settled here now. And as everyone can hear from my accent, I'm born and raised English, but of course I have an Indian background. Now I'm from a place called Hillingdon. Well, my family are from a place called Hillingdon. That's where I was born and raised, which is a kind of Boris Johnson area. So it was voted kind of majority Leave within this area. And of course, well, not of course, but in spite of that, have a lot of friends, the majority of my friends actually, work in the city, or work kind of, are millennials. I guess that's a technical term for the bracket that I fall into. I think it's 18 to 34. And the vast swathes of my friends, I mean, I only have to look at my Facebook newsfeed to discover that everyone's distraught. So in terms of the, I didn't vote, actually. I didn't vote because at the time I was undecided. And so I decided not to vote because I don't follow politics. I say particularly, I never have followed politics. My parents did both vote Leave. And what's been really interesting is that I've got, I've like yourself, Anton, I've lived in a kind of host of places, and my knowledge of it has come via basically a WhatsApp group of about 15 to 20 of us that's become the liveliest it's ever been since this whole decision, with the exception, of course, of the England Iceland game. And it's been really, really interesting. There's been like arguments to the extent that I've got some friends that have sat and stayed after hours in their office just to argue on WhatsApp with one or two people who did vote Leave. However, I haven't come to my opinion of it yet. I'm very aware. So my broad opinion, I have been indifferent to it simply because the view I've always taken with with politics and huge political decisions, whether it's been, I was working at Deloitte, for example, at the time of the credit crunch back in 2000, 2007, 2008, and this has perhaps been, the biggest kind of political / economic, whichever one comes first in people's views since then. And the view that I always take with this, because I'm very wary of what's reported and published in the media, I recognize that there's for me a few major corporations that control all of the publishing, and that also can impact the market. It's never like uncertainty. For me, I think it's overblown. I didn't vote leave, I didn't vote remain. I'm not too disconcerted that it is leave. My parents did both vote leave, and I know that I've got a lot of friends that are unhappy about that, because they make reference to, I had an Italian friend call me, and she was distraught with the idea that suddenly, somehow, the whole of the UK had become racist, and that, someone of her standing was no longer welcome. And I understand this to be perhaps a sentiment amongst a lot of kind of, let's say, EU or mainland European citizens that currently live in the UK, wherever that might be, and that there's also swathes of kind of are looking and pointing at the exchange rate, the drop in value of the sterling, the fact that half of the Labour cabinet is quitting, then you've got the FTSE dropping, and what this all mean for M&A deals going forward. However, I also look at all of that and I think, well, do I know anyone that's lost their job? Do I know anyone who's suddenly had a mortgage that's been rejected, or a loan they can no longer take? Are there any instances of sackings, deals not going through, or anyone being affected in real terms, other than kind of looking into or reading, as I say, what's there in the news, and kind of just getting scared about the whole thing, and fear kind of breeding fear? For me, it's completely overblown. I think that I've listened to arguments on both sides, and I think that the building work is just going on in the background. So if this
So my opinion on Brexit, it's clearly, for everybody that woke up the next morning, I think it was a bit of a shock. I'm happy to say I was a Remainer, very much a Remainer. But I think that all the people that are going out and complaining about what's happened really are not being rational in what they've got to do next. It's highly unlikely that the British people will go back to the polls in the very near future. We've just gone back to the polls 43 years after joining the EU to come out. So it takes around about 40 years for us to change our decisions. So the idea of going back and trying to do another thing, or trying to go against the will of the people, I think would do two things. I think the first thing that it would do is clearly alienate those that voted leave, and I think it's important to understand who those people are. And I think, secondly, going back to the polls just to overturn it would make us the laughing stock of the rest of the world. And I think that we would not be taken seriously in any negotiation now or in the future if we were to do that. So we're faced with this now. And given that we're faced with Brexit, I think as a person in business, involved in business, we have to look at the advantages rather than the disadvantages of that possibility. Because if we just look at the disadvantages and start complaining, we become emotional, we don't become constructive in what we're trying to do. So one advantage for Majestic is that we do most of our business overseas. So may the pound drop. You can have a look at all sorts of advantages quite quickly. I do think that a good dose of humor is helpful, and it's quite entertaining to see every politician in Britain resigning and collapsing and stuff. And that's no bad thing, really, because that's exactly what most of the Leave people that have been so disenfranchised by the system wanted, really, because the argument for the Remainers to these people was useless. It was things like, if we go and exit the EU, your house prices will fall. Well, these guys can't even afford a meal, leave alone a mortgage, leave alone a house. So that's not really helping. We've disenfranchised so many people that it tipped the balance on this occasion. So the two things that we can do as business people are, one, listen and understand that we need to address those things in society. And it's not just in Britain. It's also, the rise of Trump, the near right-wing government in Austria, to a certain extent, the rise of ISIS. All these things are stemming from a disproportional difference between rich and poor. And you've only got to talk to any social economics expert, and that's the kind of thing that they'll tell you. It's happened before in history, it'll happen again. So we've got to address that rather than worrying about the fact that Brexit has just happened. Because you know what? A year from now, even if we had stayed in, perhaps France might have done it, perhaps Austria might have done it. So there were risks for staying in as well as risks for going out. So I wanted to stay in. I think this is a huge amount of uncertainty. Given that we are moving out, then we need to, one, address the root causes for society. Two, we need to look at the advantages of what we can do in Britain for moving out. I think Majestic has some real opportunity. We're an exporting company, so there's a lot that we can do to help Britain per se. The site's already in 12, 13 different languages, so we already sell all around the world, not just to Europe. So it's quite possible for people to deal with trade outside the European Union, and I think that's what we've got to do. So face up to it and get on with it and have a laugh. That's what I say.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Fabrizio, I'm Italian. I've been living in London for the past 5 years almost. I moved permanently since 2013. So I pretty much enjoy my life here in London. I bought a flat, love my work, and I'm still planning to stay on the medium long term in this country, no matter what happens. Going a little bit before the actual vote and referendum, I think that my feeling and as European, I pretty much agree with the benefit that we had, each state, Italy included, in being within the European Union. But at the same time, it was obvious that everyone has because every country is different culture within the Union. The general feeling with regard to Brexit, especially in London and within the international community, among all my friends, people don't really felt like that this was going to happen as much, or the perception within the city was slightly different before the vote. So this was quite a shock, especially because probably most of what data show is that most of the people that actually voted to leave was not really living in London. But at the same time, I think is something that I understand to a degree, because even coming from Italy, we have a similar probably similar discussion at this point in time, whether to leave or not. And even within Italy, we had the discussion of separating North from South. So these kind of disputes are things that are not really new to me. And that's why, despite being quite shocked by what happened, is something that I kind of accept and also respect people that choose to leave EU. And I very much doubt that all of them are kind of making a choice without really knowing what is going to happen. But I'm pretty confident other people on the other side have different and valid opinion to vote for that. As far as it concerns what will happen next, from my side, at least from the information that I have, is pretty much unknown in terms of the short term and medium long term. Short term, nothing will happen probably, but medium long term is. So from my point of view, I'm not really concerned on what is going to happen and what the future will look like, and I'm still quite convinced I like living here and I would like to continue. Obviously, we'll see what will, from an immigration point of view and also economic point of view, what will happen in future. So just to summarize, was quite shocking, but also I think that if this is what people voted, I I came into this country and with full respect of their choices. So I will try to, you know, obviously stay because I like living here, but according to what people decide and what the government decide.
Oh, okay, right, off the cuff, Grant. Brexit. My name's Justin Parks. I've been living in Spain since 2001. I've worked online pretty much exclusively the whole time. Spain has went through some dramatic changes over the last 15 or 16 years. The world has went through some dramatic changes, and it all seems to have culminated into the local British Isles finally pulling the cork out of the bucket, and this long awaited referendum for the British people to decide whether they still wanted to remain within Europe or not. Obviously, as a Northern Irish person growing up, I've went through troubles and stuff, and things have changed there, much for the better, to be clear. And I think that was a large part to do with Europe and has probably affected my opinion in question for the positive, in terms of positively remaining connected. To what extent, which I think is the core question that the UK has had and not asked or answered. I'm still wondering how far we should go and how federalized or conglomerated or we should get. But I do believe in the aim of it, and that's sort of where I stand. So anyway, so the UK news, which I follow, and the Irish news and the Spanish news and the European in general, has been exciting and also irritating and frustrating over the last year or two. This referendum has been hanging over everything and everyone in some form or fashion, even though there has been signs of recovery economically and spiritually and people's health and attitude. It's happened. The result was a shock, I think, for the lion's share of the civilized world who cannot really fathom why. And I've always been politically orientated. I'm not sure if that's part of the culture of being Irish and Northern Irish, or it's just upbringing or a personal thing. But following the whole roll out of this and the result and the shock of the result and the lack of a plan and the lack of a follow-up has been, again, exciting and irritating at the same time for what could have been done better or worse or different. The UK have voted to leave, and I think they've made a mistake. I think that they could have, because the UK was in a very interesting position. It was Norway with the benefits, or it was one of the other European partners with the benefits. In many respects, it retained its control of its currency. It had sovereign right, even though politicians would have you believe otherwise. I think it was a matter of media control and propaganda and emotive response that brought them to the point that they're at now. And that is a mistake as far as I'm concerned, because basing any decision that carries weight towards your future should be supported by emotion, but not dictated by. Because you can't make decisions logic. That doesn't work. You've got to have heart, and you've got to have belief, and you've got to have soul in the whole thing. And they seem to have a lot of heart and soul in it for the people that voted out. My worry was that it was for misconstrued or unfair or possibly unwise. I believe that the UK, given more time, could have moved pieces on the chessboard to suit themselves even more. But I think that the immigration issue, which is blown out of massive proportion by the media in the UK, which I have lost a lot of respect for in many different ways. People believe what they read in the papers. That's an old saying that they have there, and it's still true even today in the world of ultra connectivity and social movement. I mean, how? Because people come and people go, and do you know what? It comes down to this: the UK has a fantastic social support system, and they always felt that it was being taken advantage of. Now, having seen that system in action, I know it gets taken advantage of, but usually it gets taken advantage of by its own citizens in some form or fashion. Problem. But having moved to Spain, where the social support system is you and your family, totally different, where you basically don't get a dime and a slap on the back, and maybe they'll give you a cigarette and half a beer. When the world collapsed, that's pretty much all we got. That has caused fractures, and looking at all of the different paradigms and issues and conflict and opinion and the social aspect, I think, which is what we were aiming to achieve between all of us, wasn't actually addressed within Europe and hasn't been addressed in Europe in terms of how people are supported and what they expect by a given country. Because we dealt with the markets, we dealt with the money, we dealt with the movement of people, we dealt with the schools, we dealt with everything, except we didn't deal with the jobless, and the jobless pretty much make up 30% of the European Union as it stands. So if I'm Spanish and I live in the UK, I get XYZ benefits, and if I'm British living in Spain, I get, yeah, like I say, pretty much nothing. And I'm sure that holds true between France and Germany and every other country within the Union. However, I'm just not familiar with their systems of support, so it's unfair of me to comment. But I would imagine they're dramatically different. And this issue had been dealt with, whereby every EU citizen, okay, fine, we get free healthcare throughout Europe. That's kind of a given, but that's not everything. You need a roof over your head, and you need to be sure that you're supported. The UK gives too much, but that's an internal problem. They could have changed that. They could have. They would have, if they had changed it, of course, they would have had to adapt it for every citizen. And I think that's also part of the problem, is a lot of people, I was told at one point, oh, we're voting leave in the UK because we want to safeguard our benefits, to which I was quite shocked. And it was influencing my friend who basically went, yeah, he wants to safeguard his benefits. And I went, well, it'd be different if he said he wanted to safeguard his income or safeguard his family. But to safeguard your benefits is the primary reason to get out of the EU. Just found a wee bit self-centered and shocking. So anyway, yeah, all this has happened. The world and a lot of the predictions and the stuff that was promised with the vote, should the UK leave, has come to bear. But we're only 4 or 5 days in, and the world moves quickly. But the world moves I think the world moves quickly, but rotates slowly, is kind of the place we're at. Given time, I think the UK will be okay. I think markets will settle, tempers will calm, understanding will come through. But I don't think the UK will ever be the same again. And that's taken into account the Scottish attitude, or the Scottish vote, if you want to call it, the Northern Irish question now with what's happening with the land borders, and these 1,000,001 things that a campaign, that any political campaign should have addressed leading up to a vote, been addressed one jot. It has been. Do you know what it's like? It reminds me of the rise of Hitler in a funny way, and it's a horrible thing to be talking about that, but it was through the use of propaganda and mixed messages and the blame of the immigrant and the nationalism and the pride and staticism of being together alone against the world that basically probably pretty much any dictator will use your advantage, and it's happening in the UK. I hope it doesn't go any further. I know many educated people there, and half of the population obviously have no interest whatsoever. That's clear within the vote itself. And I believe if you had 100% turnout in a vote, which will never happen, it would remain camp. I think the youth would have voted the way they wanted, and there would have been an overpowering resolve to maintain the current status quo. But we're not there. So yeah, personally, I can see turmoil again, which I'm a bit pissed off about. Sorry for the swear word. I've done very well so far not to have used any other derogatory terms at this point. Business is going to be affected. The place where I live on the south of Spain has a large expat, immigrant, British population. They will come, they will go, they will sell their property. They will probably not buy as much property, especially for the next couple of years. We have been affected by the recession here, tourism-wise and real estate-wise, just like everyone, but quite dramatically. Andalusia is still sitting on 35% on a major, considering that Spain's overall unemployment is massive as well. There's going to be more issues, and I'm tired of fighting the good fight and worrying about tomorrow and worrying about what next political calamity will affect me and my friends and my family and my business, and what dark cloud will come rolling in from some direction or other. Of course, I think that being realistic is also part of the world we live in. The security is a fallacy. Nobody can secure anything. Nobody can guarantee anything. Even in our business where we work online, people ask for guarantees, especially in the marketing sector, and you just look at them and you have to scratch your chin and raise an eyebrow and go, yeah, really? You mean anything? And those are the people that should be the basis of a guarantee. Or my government can't guarantee anything. Oh, sorry, I forgot. We don't have a government in Spain right now. We're only getting around to sorting it out. So yeah, I mean, we can't even guarantee a government. We can't. So it's a matter of looking, understanding. I tried very hard since the vote to look at it from an analytical point of view and say, what was the good reasons for the UK going out? And they are, like I've touched on very softly there, they are issues that can be managed. I think things like the European superstate and the European army, or all of this stuff, ever going to happen? It was so long and so far away that it just isn't even within the realms of possibility. It's an idea or a propaganda or a notion that was floated out there that somebody's grabbed onto, and when I can use that to my political advantage by scaring the wits out of people. Other things like, yes, Europe may have gone too far, or not necessarily gone too far, but maybe has grown too far too fast, could have been the problem. I think more measured growth and acceptance of new countries, etc., could have been the status quo. Bailouts, the Greece issue, the Spanish issue, the north of Europe supporting the south. Those are being addressed. It's just people aren't being told that those are being addressed in the right way. I've seen development here in Spain that 10 years ago, it just wouldn't have happened. The Costa del Sol and Andalusia, it was never Northern Europe, it was it was never Southern Europe, it was Northern Africa. And that was true 10 years ago. This massive change happening if you take a look back over the last 10 years. And I think you mentioned different cities around Spain, like Valencia, which changed dramatically, drove itself into massive debt, but is now a Western city. Stunning place. That all happens. It's happening if you want to look for it. It's happening if you want to see it. But people aren't being told about it because the world is so full of information that the clear intent or positivity isn't coming through. Much, I think, today. I think everyone has got too many opinions and listens to too many opinions, and experts have proven to be not so expert, and politicians have proven yet again to be liars. And I think that accountability is also one of the major issues that was a concern for Europe. Wrongly, I believe, if you understand how the structure of Europe is, but still there is this feeling of faceless bureaucracy and some person 100 million miles away at the other side of the planet making decisions that affect your world. Yeah, I think going forward for everyone, we do have to look at if Brexit comes to fruition, because there is still a lot of doubt out there. If it comes to pass, and it will have a lot of internal issues to deal with, fine. It will have a lot of external issues to deal with, fine. Europe has its own issues to deal with. I think that we can learn from it, that somebody, that some nation has decided, or enough of a nation has decided that it needs to stand up and, instead of working within the framework, really light a fire under the ass of the EU itself, of the structure of the project, and say, we don't want this anymore. This is how much we don't want this anymore. That could be down to communication, that could be down to resolve, that could be down to political structure, that could be down to education, that could be down to a million things. And that again is part of the problem. There's too much to communicate and too much to handle. But we are where we are, and I still believe in Europe. Like I say, it could be tempered, it could be tapered off, it could be a wee bit more localized in some ways. But I believe it needs to work for the future. And I think that part of the problems that we face in terms of terrorism, being from Northern Ireland, I'm pretty much an expert on that, and anyone wants to fight me on it, yeah, I'd fight you on it. We have to find ways of building bridges and connecting with people. There is always going to be a militant, hardline, hot-headed faction within every aspect of society and culture. That will never go away. Don't fool yourself. People get annoyed, people get worked up, people lose their temper. That's the human paradigm, the human spirit. It shouldn't be destroyed, because sometimes we've celebrated the world for taking a stand, and history has looked back at the Che Guevaras and okay through rose-tinted glasses, etc., and went, well, if they didn't stand up for this, then we wouldn't have had that today. We've just got to keep trying, I think, and maybe the UK just needs a break and needs to go and think about what it's doing and look at itself and realize that the world is moving on, and it needs 10 or 15 years for its population to see it. Possibly what's the old adage? You can't see the forest for the trees. Maybe the UK needs to go and stand on the hill a wee while and look at the forest and see what's happening and get a grasp of it. And then possibly another government will come in, and the new generation will come through and remember what Europe was and see where Europe is, and hopefully it'll be something that they want to be a part of again. And let's go from there. But let's just try not to kill each other in the meantime. Be nice.
As a person who really passionately believes that Britain's greatness comes from our inclusivity and our diversity and our ability to have access to a huge pool of skilled migrant workers, then for me as an individual, Brexit is a tragedy. I think if we negotiate free movement across the EU, regardless of that, we have still sent ultimately a negative, insular message of isolation to a global audience. And in a time when I feel as though the world should be unifying and coming together, I just disagree with it on principle. Aside from that, there will inevitably be economic fallout from Britain leaving the EU. We're already starting to see that. I don't believe, I'm no economist, but I don't believe that we will have access to the single market, because the EU is now in a position where it has to make an example that, you know, Britain can't get access to those trade deals without being part of the EU. I would like to think that as a country we will be able to weather the economic storm that we're about to go through in the mid to long term, but certainly in the short term we're going to have quite significant economic fallout from this, and it's already happening. I think one of the key things that's important is the Leave vote was a democratic one, and whilst nearly half of the country has kind of been let down by our version of democracy, that's what our version of democracy is. So it is a democratic vote, and we have to respect that. And lots of people who did vote leave did so with incredibly well-reasoned, justified, well-thought-out arguments. And I think all we can do now as a nation, and more broadly at kind of a global level, is to come together and make sure that we're protecting the most vulnerable people within our society. And when I say vulnerable people, I'm thinking about, from an economic perspective, those who are likely to be hit most from what is probably going to be a recession, but also just to make sure that we don't allow us leaving the European Union, we don't allow that in any way to be a way that we kind of have institutionalized racism. We can't let that be the case, and we need to ensure that we continue to be a country that thrives and grows and develops based on immigration, and that we remain open and inclusive. And I believe that's the way we grow our economy, and that's how we move forward through this.
Well, yeah, how we're feeling about Brexit here is pretty mixed at the moment. I think it's going to take a little while for the news to settle in. I think it's only been a few days. There's a lot of kind of fallout from it as well. I mean, you can see from what's happening kind of in the markets as well, and the value of the pound is starting to kind of pick up a little bit now. So I mean, it has kind of it has a couple of different impacts for us. There are kind of upsides to it. Being a UK-based company, having a low value on the pound means that we get a better rate on our business with the US, which is traded in dollars. So that's kind of one small upside. I suppose being a London-based company, we are London was much more focused on the Remain, and had sort of a more like a 70% Remain vote, as opposed to the rest of other areas of the country where it was much more divided. I think as a whole, everyone's a bit confused at the moment and wondering like what's the best way to move forwards. We're not really sure what the kind of long-term impact on our business will be. And I think as well, like from a personal level, I'm not really sure what the long-term impact will be. I think what we really need is to see a bit more stability coming from the government. I think at the moment with the Conservative leadership contest, probably that's not helping anything. And of course now Labour's started to fall apart as well. That's really not helping either. I think what would be the best thing at this point is for us to see like a really strong united government, and to see some real leadership coming out. And I think that's really what the kind of markets need and what the economy needs. I don't think just the Chancellor coming out and giving some soothing words is really enough. So I suppose at the moment the overwhelming kind of feeling is one of wondering what exactly is going to happen next. No one's really quite sure. It's been a really eventful past few days, and I suppose we'll just have to wait and see what happens over the next couple of weeks. I mean, you can see as well that in Europe there's started to become a more of a kind of united front. I was reading in the papers this morning about Angela Merkel and Francis Hollande saying that they were both on the same page, and that they're both going to unite, create a good plan for Brexit. And I think really that's kind of what we need at this point, is for everyone to just put it behind us. Say, yes, this has happened. Now, how are we going to move on from this and to come out of it stronger? I think for me personally, it would be really good to see some strong leadership coming from both the government and the opposition, and to actually see an actual plan of action coming out, so that people know what the timeline is, so that we can then, hopefully that will calm the markets down, it will calm the exchange rate down, and it will make doing business for us easier as well. So I think really that's kind of where we are at the moment. And we're just really hoping for more stability and better leadership, and really to find out what's going to happen next.
Hi, I'm Tim. Anton from Web Promo is reaching out to everyone, just getting his opinion, or our opinion as living in the UK on Brexit. So just to give you the point of view where I'm based and where I live, I'm not in London, I'm in the Midlands. The Midlands is very manufacturing based, very industrial based, and also very farm based. I myself, I voted to leave. And the majority in this county also voted to leave. So why is that, or what is the feeling within the area that I particularly live and work, and the businesses that I tend to serve and work with? As I said, Midlands, very manufacturing, so very skill-based, very labor-intensive based. In fact, a little bit of info, I'm in Corby itself, and we actually, the steel manufacturing here actually built the oil pipeline that facilitated the D-Day invasions. So without our steel industry, D-Day would never have happened. So it's just to give you that kind of feel of the people and the culture within the Midlands and where I am. This, I personally believe, obviously I looked at a lot of factors leading up to this, but on a, obviously I can't speak for everyone, but the feeling I got from the people in the area, this is about taking back control of their businesses and their future. Why is that? Well, the simple fact is, we've got mass companies here. We've got things like JCB, we've got Avon, we've got Weetabix. We've got some very, very big companies. These large companies are wholly now, obviously in the single European market, are wholly dependent on a very protected trade. And I'll just take one, which is our sort of our cereal manufacturer here. As you know, Europe doesn't always have the greatest of summers, including the UK. So they needed to, or in the past, always imported cereals, wheat, what they needed for their, their breakfast, for their products from all around the world. The EU, being a protectionist organization, limited this. So they had to buy now their cereal products specifically from Europe at a set tariff. If they then wanted to buy, if there then was a bad summer in Europe, and harvests were lower, and they needed additional product, wheat, wherever, from parts of the world, whether it be from America, whether it be from Africa, so any other parts of the world, those import tariffs now, because of the protectionist system that Europe had, was pretty much 10 times the price of what they used to be able to buy it for. As a subsequent result, manufacturing has massively declined. Now, this is not only part of Europe as such, because, for example, our steel industry, we know for a fact that even our UK government vetoed increasing of tariffs of cheap steel coming from China in the EU Parliament. So there is a bit of both. There's the protectionism of Europe, which is seen, and also the own fault of our own government in terms of not protecting manufacturing here. So it was two sides of the coin. One was, we want to do business with who we want to do business with at our own terms. The second part was, the government has completely forgotten the normal average working person. to highlight that in this context, also in the area we live, the influx of migrant labor, which, you know, I've always said, for me personally, it's the law of supply and demand. If the demand is there, then people will come. If the demand is no longer there, people won't influx. So you have to look at that. However, a lot of people don't see it like that. You know, if there's a job, people will, you know, apply for that job. If there isn't a job, people won't actually move to an area. However, we've got a combination specifically where we are, where the sheer number and influx hasn't been able to, you know, be managed by the structure, you know, whether it be schools, hospitals, etc. We built a large new high school. You know, there's several obviously, but the largest one now that was recently completed about 4 years ago, that takes up to 1,000 kids, and now is completely oversubscribed for the next 5 years. And they are just halfway through completion of another 12,000 houses with no plans on new schools. We've got one hospital, which is about 15 miles away, which literally had to close its doors to A&E an unprecedented amount of times last year, because literally there's no more resource or space to manage it. So, you know, these are all the situations now where we've got an estimated, let's say, you know, 12,000 homes. Let's say there's 2 people in the homes, another, you know, let's say even just 1 child. You're looking at 30,000 more people coming into the town. Majority of them are direct on the commuter belt straight into London, because we have a direct train line straight in. So a lot of them will be from out of town London commuting, but the kids will still need to go somewhere. So call that an extra 12,000 kids, for example's sake. We've only just had 1 high school with an additional 1,000 places. It's already oversubscribed. The hospital can't cope. It keeps closing its doors, literally, to A&E patients. There's just literally not enough to maintain it. Obviously, police force is not increasing because, well, there's obviously budgetary constraints, etc., etc. So from the area I live in, this was about taking back control from politicians, our own politicians, who have become so out of touch with the working class, who are finding it increasingly difficult for their children to find a place in school near where they live, to even get into a hospital in, you know, and these are, you know, even in an emergency. So these are the real world situations happening on the ground in the area that I live in and work in. So my opinion, and that was based upon the exact set of circumstances in our area. I can't speak for other people living in, you know, London or you know, another larger city, and this is purely not from a tech-based situation. On the flip side, for me, for my business, it's not going to make a difference to me as such. I already trade massively. Funny enough, not actually in Europe, and not a lot of my clients are in Europe. Most of my clients are outside of Europe, around the world, and of course in the UK. Funny enough, it's already improved because I have already had clients outside with the drop in the pound slightly and the exchange rate, which has recovered, you know. But I've already had additional work booked in from clients realizing the benefit in terms of, hey, we can afford a little bit more this month in terms of, you know, So actually, it's, you know, that's benefited me totally. I'm not in manufacturing as such. Obviously, I'm online, so I can literally work anywhere in the world. You know, and I haven't necessarily traded in Europe herself for whatever reasons that may be. They just, you know, clients just haven't really materialized as much as the rest of the world. So that's, you know, pretty much my opinion in terms of Brexit. There were rightly and wrongly, there were rightly and wrong ways that this campaign from both sides was run. I really feel that this also, the way the campaign was run, showed the lack of understanding of the majority. Well, it was a majority, so the lack of understanding of the majority of the people in the UK. Complete lack of understanding of what's happening around and what's on the ground. You know, I think it was pretty disgraceful the way both parties ran the campaign. I also feel that there could have been a bit of a nail in the coffin when even I know Euro politicians were told not to say, but when Juncker came in and had a couple of his words to say about it, that really got the fighting spirit up. When George Osborne, you know, pretty much threatened doom and gloom completely, and in fact, he's still continuing with that, which I think is going to be another nail in his political coffin. And of course, idiotic things like David Cameron basically saying, look, this is going to, you know, World War III starting out. Literally, you know, this the country has basically said, look, you know, we're not putting up with your, you know, your rubbish anymore. We've got a lot of problems in this country that we need to sort out economically. There is a lot of deprived areas in this in the country, and people are scared for their futures and their children's futures. If you can't find a school place, if you can't get into a hospital near you, these are massive problems. On the flip side of that, what did the Leave campaign do wrong? I know the Remainers are constantly going on about this bus, when in fact, in all honesty, it was a bus with a slogan on, where after that actual bus, that party political bus was launched, probably for 4 months or 3 months, in every press and TV debate and every discussion, if people actually watched the discussions, the Leave campaign said, yeah, you know, 350 million a week is the total figure. We do get rebates totaling 140 million a week. So we can still keep paying those rebates. I think 80 million goes to NHS, something like, you know, 20 million goes to farming and manufacturing, and, you know, 1 million goes there. So essentially, the actual rebate, which they should have probably used on the bus, was we'll still have 160 million in spare change at the end of the week. They did point that out. I think the Remainers are jumping on this bus, which, you know, if they'd actually listened to any of the, you know, in every debate, they said to them, you know, to the Leave people, 350 million really, and they would always say 350 million is the overall amount, 160 is what we would get, so etc. They did break it down. So of course, you know, I think people need to look at the actual campaign. There was rights and wrong on both, but for me, this was the average working class Brit saying enough is enough now. We need to take back control of. We don't need 200 pieces of legislation on toothpaste. We don't need 165 pieces of legislation on a bath towel. These are all kind of protectionist mechanisms put in place to, protect European manufacturing and producers, and not allowing us to, or penalizing in the sense that if we needed a product or, to manufacture from another part of the world. Tate & Lyle, another example, the largest sugar producer in the world 50 years ago, now is a fraction of its size. They used to have 200 odd ships docking in London at the Tate & Lyle dock to deliver their sugar every week. Literally, it's one ship a week now. Same again, because they're forced to bury sugar beet from Europe, where the cost of sugarcane, which they always bought from the Caribbean, is 10 times higher because of the protectionist market of the European Union. So look, there are pros and cons on both sides of it, but from where I live, this was about ordinary people to protect their future and their children's future. They needed to be able to get rid of a politician who didn't deliver on their promises, which you cannot obviously do with the EU. And that's obviously, coming from the area I live in, that's my personal opinion, and that is what I believe the mood on the ground was. I went out on Friday night for a drink, and to be quite honest, around the town, I popped into a couple of pubs around the town in the area. There was it was a party atmosphere. People understand that there's going to be, a difficult transition period ahead. They understand that, this is not a silver bullet, but they feel an oversense of relief now that for them and their future generations, that if a politician fails to deliver on their political promises, they can physically elect for that person to go, and then they can elect the new one in. They feel as if they've taken back control of the country. They feel that they now have a say in their towns, their schools, their kids' futures. So that's the feel in the area I live in.